This is Patterns of Inheritance in less than 5 minutes. First of all, there's two terms here that are often confused, congenital and genetic. Congenital just means that it's present at birth. There's a condition that's present at birth. It's a genetic condition, and it's there. Genetic just means that you're genetically predisposed to express a condition or a disease, but not necessarily at birth. I'm going to skip down to pedigree. Whenever you build a pedigree, you build it around an individual. That individual can be the proband, which is the affected individual, or the consultant, which is the individual that requests the pedigree. We have a couple symbols here that are necessary to know. Square is male, circle is female. One line between them is mating. 2 lines between them means that they've mated and they're relatives. If you have a shaded in shape, that means they're affected with a condition. If they're unshaded, they're unaffected. There's 3 types of heterogeneity that we need to know. Allelic, locus, and phenotypic, or clinical. It's the same thing. Allelic means that there's a single gene that produces a single phenotypic outcome. Locus means that there's 2 or more loci, so multiple genes produce one phenotypic outcome. Many genes, one outcome. Phenotypic means that there is a single gene that produces many phenotypic outcomes. So allelic, locus, and phenotypic. There's 4 types of inheritance that we need to be aware of. Autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive. Autosomal is neither one of them are influenced by sex. Basically, with autosomal dominant, you only need one parent that expresses that dominant gene. If they're heterozygous, then 50% of the offspring are going to produce that condition. And autosomal dominant deals with structural proteins. Autosomal recessive, both parents have to produce the recessive trait in order for it to be expressed in their offspring. If they're both heterozygotes, 25% of the offspring will be effective. Also, it deals with enzymatic proteins. Autosomal dominant is structural. Autosomal recessive is enzymatic. With X-linked dominance, what you're dealing with here is the male is commonly lethal. It's almost always lethal in males. So 100% of the daughters are effective, and the father always passes on to the disorder to their daughters. With X-linked recessive, the fathers also pass on 100% to their daughters. The daughters will only express this if their maternally inherited X chromosome is inactivated, and it manifests in males. It usually manifests in males, but it usually skips a generation. An affected father doesn't usually pass it on to a male because the father passes on that Y chromosome to the male. Okay, finally, we want to talk about the different general types of inheritance. Mendelian inheritance follows 2 laws, the law of segregation. This means that each allele only represents once. That means 1 copy of each gene is produced during gametogenesis. The law of independent assortment simply says that there's random alignment of homologous chromosomes. That means that the assortment of one gene doesn't affect the assortment of another. It's purely random. Multifactorial inheritance does not follow the laws of Mendelian inheritance. It's a cumulative effect, a polygenic and qualitative inheritance effect, where there's multiple genes at different loci, and they all cumulatively produce an effect of expression. There's no dominance or recessive here. So how you can predict whether something will be expressed is by these liability curves. The sum of the area underneath this curve is the sum of every bad thing, genetic or environmental, that can happen, that can occur, that can produce this disease. The threshold is this line here, and if an individual goes over the number of things that contribute to a disease, they go over the threshold and they express the disease. There's certain things that can shift the curve to the right or shift the threshold to the left, however you want to consider it. And those things are discussed here in the hallmarks. One thing would be if you have a relative that expresses that is effective and expresses the phenotype of a condition, that's going to shift this curve to the right, and you're going to have a higher chance of expressing this. Also, affected children do not have to have normal parents, but increased severity of condition with a parent often increases the recurrent risk. Real quickly, the regression to the mean here just simply means that if you have 2 people who have extreme phenotypes, like really tall people, they're going to produce an individual that has a more normal phenotype. They're going to go back to the meat of the curve. They're going to produce a normal height individual. Thanks.